Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan just for that gentle hum in the background. And take a deep breath because tonight we're not going into grand halls or epic battles. No, tonight we're stepping into the soil, into a garden where vegetables had more character than most nobles and where love once bloomed, right between a patch of nettles and a boy too nervous to say her name. But before we get our hands dirty, a quick favor. If you find comfort in these quiet, quirky strolls through forgotten history, go ahead and tap that like button. It helps others find their way here. Subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's tale. Trust me, it's a special one. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? What time is it for you? I love seeing how far these stories reach. Now picture this, England, spring of 1283. The frost is gone, but not forgotten. A man named Tormund kneels in the cold mud. He's not a warrior, not a bard, just a gardener. But in this world, planting skirret, yes, that's a vegetable, not a spell from Hogwarts, was its own act of hope. Around him, the ground is damp with memory, and his back is sore from more seasons than he cares to count. A few steps away, his wife Rowena picks leaves from a plant called Good King Henry. Not a man, a vegetable. Though frankly, she talks to it more kindly than she does to her husband. Dinner will be the same as yesterday if they're lucky. If not, even the goats are side-eyeing the soup pot. This isn't just a story about vegetables. It's a story about survival, about love, and about the stubborn, leafy hope that grows even when everything else is falling apart. Ready? Let's dig in. By now, the morning fog has lifted just enough to reveal the full scope of Tormund's humble garden. It's not large, more like a patchwork of dirt clinging to the edge of a cottage that's seen better centuries. But every inch of it has been argued over, weeded, and blessed with the kind of stubborn devotion that only comes from people who don't have the luxury of giving up. His knees crack as he stands. Not from old age, he's barely 50, but because the medieval floor plan for a man's life includes equal parts dirt, regret, and whatever's left after both. Rowena, his wife, is already muttering under her breath as she hauls a basket of leaves across the yard. She's got that look on her face, the one that says she just remembered there's no salt left, the barley's running low, and she married a man who thinks planting extra leeks is an acceptable romantic gesture. She doesn't hate Tormund, at least not every day, but she's developed a deep emotional bond with Good King Henry, the perennial green that grows just outside their back door. It doesn't talk back, it doesn't complain, and most importantly, it comes back every year without being asked. Behind them, the village is waking up. Not in the charming birds chirping way that bards like to write about. No, it's more of a coughing, goat screaming, someone just fell in the muck again kind of awakening. Children run past barefoot, laughing as they chase each other through a line of wash hanging crookedly in the breeze. A dog barks at nothing. Somewhere a pot is already boiling, probably water, probably for something disappointing. And just when it seems like this could be a slow, forgettable day, the air shifts. Not a gust of wind, not a storm, a noise, a clatter near the road. Tormund looks up, hand resting on his worn spade. Rowena freezes, halfway through tossing a handful of greens into a wooden bowl. A cart, not just any cart, a merchant's cart. Painted in colors that used to be bright, pulled by a donkey that looks like it lost an argument with life. But it's here, and on it, a man with a wide grin and a sack full of mystery. He sets up shop just outside the gate, calling out in a voice that somehow carries over the clamor. Herbs, seeds, spices from lands you've only heard about in stories told by liars. Tormund eyes the cart. Rowena's already halfway there. And this is where things get interesting. Velda, their daughter, 15, stubborn, sharp-tongued, and sharper-eyed, has been waiting for something like this. She's tired of helping with turnips, tired of being told to harvest parsnips like her hands were forged for root vegetables. She wants something new, something weird, something that doesn't already taste like disappointment and compromise. She approaches the cart with the air of someone who knows what they're doing, even if they absolutely do not. The merchant raises an eyebrow. She doesn't flinch. "I'll trade you," she says, holding up a wooden spoon she carved herself. It's not fancy, but it's smooth, well-balanced, and more useful than half the things in the merchant's cart. He sniffs. "What for?" "Seeds," she replies. "Something rare, something strange, something that bites back." The man chuckles. You want a challenge, girl? Fine. Try these. He hands her a small cloth pouch. Inside, she finds rocket, lovage, wormwood, herbs with names like battle cries and flavors to match. She doesn't ask permission. She just plants them. Behind the cottage, near the fence, in a line of soil she's claimed as her own. The next morning, she wakes up earlier than usual, checks her rows, watered them, talks to them, maybe, just a little. A week later, Eric, yes, the boy from down the lane with shoulders too big for his age and a heart too soft to carry them, passes by. He spots Velda near her garden, holding a flat piece of bread, a thin slice of cheese, and something green. Want some? She asks, not looking at him. He hesitates, takes it, bites. His face does something complicated. It's different, he says. Good different or bad different? He nods slowly. I think good. And just like that, the world tilts, not by much. Not in a way that matters to kings or merchants or chroniclers, but in that garden between bites of rocket and glances they're pretending not to notice, something grows. Not long after he returns, with a basket of eggs, a peace offering, or maybe a thank you, or maybe just because. Back inside, Rowena watches from the doorway. She says nothing, just turns and adds another handful of good King Henry into the pot. Because sometimes, in a world where everything feels like it's barely holding together, the smallest gestures are the ones that feed you. Outside, Velda adjusts her rows, tends the wormwood, smiles, barely. Tormund watches them from the field, leans on his spade, and mutters, "Hope she knows wormwood's bitter as sin." Rowena doesn't miss a beat. So is life, and yet here we are. And there it is, the moment. Small, easily missed, but real. Because medieval life wasn't all pottage and plague. It was hands in the dirt, hearts too big for their bodies, and gardens that grew more than just food. They grew people, too. And tomorrow we meet someone who grows nothing but takes everything. A tale of shadows, secrets, and the price of silence. You won't want to miss it. The garden, once quiet, has become a sort of unofficial gathering point. Not because it's large or beautiful, it's not, but because something about Velda's strange patch of herbs has started drawing attention. The rocket's bold scent cuts through the morning air like a challenge. The lovage stands tall and proud, and the wormwood, well, it makes even the goats reconsider their life choices. Eric stops by more often now. Not always with eggs. Sometimes he brings a story. Sometimes a question. Sometimes just silence. Velda never minds. The plants, after all, don't say much either. But not everyone finds this new growth charming. It's late afternoon when old Thorn limps past the garden gate. Thorn, village tanner, unofficial rumor mill, professional grumbler. He pauses, leans on his crooked cane, and squints at the herbs like they personally insulted his ancestors. Wormwood, he mutters. Bad sign, that. Used to grow by the gallows. Wards off spirits, or invites them, depending on who you ask. Velda straightens, wiping dirt from her hands. It's just a plant. Thorn spits into the dust. That's what they said about hemlock. And with that, he limps on, trailing a mix of suspicion and the faint scent of something dead and leathered. Velda watches him go, heart thudding a little louder than before. She'd heard the whispers, that planting bitter herbs was a witch's game. That strange seeds led to stranger fates, but she didn't believe it. Not really. Still, that night, she dreams of the garden, only now it's larger, wild, overgrown. The rocket curls like smoke, the wormwood pulses with a heartbeat not her own. She wakes with a start, just in time to hear something fall outside. It's probably a chicken. It's always a chicken. But the sound doesn't come again. The next morning, something's wrong. Tormund is hunched over by the fence, frowning. Rowena stands nearby, arms crossed tight. The rocket's been torn up, he says, roots and all. Velda rushes over. Her section of the garden is a mess. Stems snapped, leaves trampled. The wooden stakes she'd used to mark the rows gone. Her little patch looks like it lost a fight with a very determined, very angry ghost. Foxes? Eric asks from behind her. Foxes don't hate vegetables, Velda snaps, more shaken than she wants to admit. Rowena bends down and picks something from the dirt. It's a carved spoon, Velda's spoon, the one she'd traded to the merchant. Strange thing to bring back, Rowena murmurs, brow furrowing. That evening, no one says much. The soup is bland. The mood, worse. Velda stares at the spoon like it might explain itself. The next day, she replants. Not because she expects the herbs to grow again, they probably won't, but because if she doesn't try, the silence wins. And in this village, silence can be dangerous. Tormund helps without a word. Even Rowena hands over a handful of saved leek seeds like a peace offering. But something has shifted. People glance at Velda differently now. Conversations stop when she walks past. Even Eric hesitates more before stepping into the garden. The seeds she'd planted with hope are now seen as warnings. And then there's the boy. He's not from the village. No one knows his name. He shows up just after sundown, barefoot, with eyes too wide and too quiet. He doesn't speak, just stares at the garden, then walks away. Velda spots him 3 nights in a row, always watching the same spot near the hedgerow. On the 4th night, she walks over. "Are you lost?" she asks. He blinks, slowly. "You shouldn't have traded." "What?" "For those seeds. You shouldn't have traded." He turns and vanishes into the trees like smoke. Velda doesn't sleep much after that. The garden feels heavier. The wormwood, replanted and somehow thriving, seems to lean closer each day. Its scent is stronger now, sharp, bitter, not entirely natural. Rowena burns herbs in the hearth. Not because she believes, she says, but because sometimes belief is the only thing left when reason doesn't answer. Tormund says little. He watches the sky more than the soil now. And Eric? Eric brings fewer eggs. When he does speak, it's shorter. "You should pull them up," he says once. "All of them. Just be done with it." Velda doesn't, because pulling them up would mean fear wins, and fear in this world always has enough of a harvest. The merchant never returns. No one remembers his name. His cart, his donkey, his grin, all gone like a rumor. Some say he was a wandering liar, others say he was never there to begin with. But Velda remembers she still has the spoon. And the garden? The garden grows. It grows even when the weather doesn't want it to. It grows when everything else wilts. The herbs twist toward the sky with a hunger that feels older than the village itself. One morning, Velda finds a new plant in the patch. She didn't plant it. No one did. It's dark, wide-leaved, and hums, not audibly, but in a way you feel in your teeth. She doesn't tell anyone, not yet, because this garden isn't just hers anymore. It belongs to something else now, and it's not done growing. The strange plant didn't ask to be planted. It just appeared, one morning like a secret that decided to speak up. Its leaves were thick, almost waxy, and the color of storm clouds pressed into velvet. At first, Velda thought it might be a weed, but nothing about it was accidental. The way it grew, perfectly centered, unnaturally still, felt intentional. Like it was watching her, even though it didn't have eyes. She didn't tell Tormund or Rowena. Definitely not Eric. The village had already decided that her garden was strange enough. No need to fan the flames of suspicion when you're already smoldering in it. But she watched it. Every morning, every night. And the more she watched, the less she was sure that it was just a plant. The leaves never wilted. The soil beneath it stayed oddly moist, even when the rest of the garden cracked under a stretch of dry days. One morning, she swore it had grown an inch overnight. By the end of the week, it was up to her knees. That's when the dreams started. At first, it was just flashes, a red sky, crows flying backward, the feeling of standing in a field with no shadow. Then it got worse. In one dream, she woke up to find her hands buried in dirt that writhed like worms. In another, the entire garden whispered her name in voices she didn't recognize. Not out loud, not exactly, but in that way, dreams sometimes find your name and twist it like a thread pulled too tight. Rowena noticed the change before anyone else. "You're pale," she said one morning, "and twitchier than a fox in a henhouse. What's wrong?" Velda tried to smile. "Just bad dreams." Rowena didn't push, but she started leaving herbs by the hearth again, bundles of mugwort and sage hung upside down like quiet spells no one admitted to believing in. She didn't say it out loud, but Velda knew. Her mother was scared. The villagers grew quieter around her. Eric came only once that week. He didn't step into the garden. He just stood by the fence, arms crossed, watching the strange plant like it might leap up and bite someone. "You need to dig it up," he said. "I can't." Why? She didn't have an answer. Not one she could say without sounding like the kind of person the village would gladly tie to a post and test for floating. Because deep down, she didn't think it would let her. She tried once, just to see, just to be sure she wasn't being ridiculous. She'd grabbed a spade, walked over, and started to dig, but the soil, so soft and rich before, turned to stone. Her fingers trembled, her chest tightened, the spade slipped from her hand. And the plant, it didn't move, but she could feel it smiling. That night she didn't sleep, not because she was afraid, though she was, but because the wind carried something new. Not a smell, not a sound, but a presence. The kind of weight in the air that comes before a storm or after something has already broken. By dawn, the village was buzzing. Henrik, the old shepherd, was missing. His goats were found wandering the path near the woods, bleeding like they'd seen ghosts. His cottage door was wide open. His staff lay broken in two. And in the center of the room, someone or something had drawn a circle in soot. Inside the circle, a single leaf rested. Storm cloud gray, velvet soft, unmistakable. One of Velda's plant. Only she hadn't left the garden. She was sure of it, wasn't she? The villagers didn't confront her. Not directly. They're peasants, not soldiers. Fear makes people cautious first, violent later. They whispered, they stared, and when Velda passed by, they looked down or looked away. Tormund, for his part, stood in front of their door every night with a dull axe and a prayer he couldn't quite remember all the words to. Rowena kept a pot of boiling herbs on the fire day and night. The smell of sage clung to everything. Even the dog refused to sleep near the back fence. And Velda? She stayed by the garden. She couldn't leave it, even when she wanted to. The strange plant was nearly waist-high now. Its leaves shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Not reflection, something else. Like it held its own light, a pale, ghostly glow that pulsed once every few seconds. Like a heartbeat. 3 nights after Henrik vanished, the boy came back, the one from the woods, the one who said she shouldn't have traded. This time he was closer, not just watching, waiting. Velda stepped out, heart pounding. "You," she whispered. "What is it?" His eyes were black. Not dark, black. Like they forgot how to reflect light. He didn't blink. "It's hungry," he said. "What is?" "The seed. The thing in your garden. It wasn't meant for you or your village. It was meant to be buried, forgotten." She swallowed. "Then why give it to me?" "I didn't," he said. "But now that it's grown, it remembers." He turned to leave, then paused. "If it flowers," he said softly, "run." And then he vanished. Not walked away. Vanished, like breath in winter air. That night, Velda sat by the garden until sunrise. She watched the plant, watched the leaves shift gently even when the wind didn't blow, and at some point she realized something terrifying. It had buds. Tiny, bulbous, pulsing buds. It was going to bloom. And she didn't know what that meant, only that the boy had told her to run. And for the first time in her life, she was starting to wonder if maybe she should. The buds bloomed at midnight, not in a poetic, soft blossom under moonlight kind of way. No, these things didn't open, they ruptured. Like a scream made visible, like something inside them clawed its way out. The petals unfurled in slow, twitching jerks, revealing a core so dark it seemed to suck the moonlight into itself. They didn't smell like flowers. They smelled like copper, like wet earth after a storm, like something that bled. Velda watched it happen from her window, frozen. She couldn't move. She didn't breathe. The garden, once a patch of modest survival, now pulsed with life that didn't belong. The other plants had wilted as if they knew they'd been outgrown. Good King Henry had curled in on itself. The leeks had turned brittle. Even the nettles looked scared. Only the strange plant thrived. In the dark, it stood tall, no longer waist-high, but chest-level, its leaves reaching outward, wider than before, with veins that pulsed a soft, eerie glow. And at the center of it all, a single bloom stared back at her. Yes, stared. She didn't know how else to describe it. She couldn't look away. It wasn't just a plant anymore. It was aware. She backed away from the window, breath shaky. Downstairs, she heard movement. Tormund's boots scraping the floor, Rowena whispering a prayer under her breath, words ancient and half-remembered. She crept down the stairs and found them both awake. "You saw it too?" she asked. Rowena didn't answer, just stared into the fire. Tormund tightened his grip on his axe. "It's not just growing," he said. "It's spreading." And he was right. By morning, tendrils had reached beyond the garden fence. One had wrapped around a fence post, splitting it down the middle. Another had crawled into the chicken coop. The hens refused to go near it. The rooster was gone. Just gone. No feathers. No sound. No body. Just missing. And the ground was changing. The soil near the plant had turned dark, oily, thick, like it had forgotten how to be dirt. When Tormund jabbed at it with a stick, the stick snapped. When Rowena sprinkled salt, the salt dissolved instantly. Velda tried not to think about what that meant. The villagers noticed. They didn't say anything at first. They didn't have to. Doors were closed faster when she passed. Children were called inside early. Even Eric, who once stood by her side without hesitation, now only looked at her from a distance. No more eggs, no more stories, only silence. And then the second person went missing. Marta, the baker's wife. She had gone to fetch water from the well, not 20 steps from her front door. She never made it. Her bucket was found lying in the dirt. Her shawl was torn, caught on something no one could explain. The well water turned black for 2 days. That night, the boy returned. But he looked different, older, tired, like the weeks had aged him in hours. Velda didn't wait for him to speak. "Tell me what it wants," she demanded. "Tell me what it is." He looked at her, really looked. "It's not from here," he said. "Not your time, not your world. It was buried long ago because the earth couldn't kill it, only silence could. But you fed it with curiosity, with names, with memory, and now it remembers what it used to be." Velda's voice cracked. "And what's that?" The boy stepped closer. "A god, or the shadow of one. Something that used to be worshipped before we learned to fear it, before language was carved into stone, before fire had a name." She laughed. Not because it was funny, but because her brain refused to believe it. "A god," she repeated, like it might break the word. The boy nodded. "Not a kind one. Not the kind that wants temples. The kind that grows where fear is deepest. The kind that feeds not on blood, but on awe." And suddenly it made sense. The way the plant responded to her attention, the dreams, the whispers, the way people avoided her, how their fear only made it grow. It didn't want to be picked. It wanted to be known. And now that it was blooming. "What happens next?" she asked. The boy hesitated. "When it reaches full bloom, it will open the ground." "To what?" "To what it remembers, and what remembers it." He looked past her toward the garden, now pulsing faintly in the dark. "You have one chance," he said. "One way to stop it." Velda's chest tightened. "Tell me." "You have to forget it, and make everyone else forget too. Tear it out. Burn the garden, destroy everything connected to it. Names, seeds, stories, even memory. If anyone remembers, it lives." "But that's impossible," she whispered. "It's already part of us now." The boy's eyes softened. "Then run." And he vanished, again, as if swallowed by the night. She stood in silence, heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to tear the thing out with her bare hands. But as she stepped toward the garden, something moved. Not wind, not animal. The soil itself shifted, cracked, and from beneath the plant, something began to rise. Not roots, not vines. Fingers. Velda turned and ran. Not because she was brave, but because she finally understood. The garden was never hers. She had been growing it, but it had been growing her too. She didn't look back. Velda ran like the night itself was chasing her, because in a way, it was. The air behind her cracked, sharp and sudden, like the earth itself was splitting open. The ground trembled beneath her bare feet as she tore across the frost-kissed grass, heart hammering, lungs burning. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Screaming felt like it would give whatever was rising a name, and names, she'd learned, had power. Rowena was the first person she saw standing frozen at the doorway, her face lit by the dim, flickering light of the hearth. "Inside," Velda gasped. "Now, lock the door. Don't ask. Just do it." Rowena didn't argue. That was how serious her daughter's voice sounded. Tormund was already pushing a heavy beam across the door before Velda even slammed it shut behind her. The cottage had never felt smaller. The walls, thinner. The air, heavier. Somewhere outside, the wind howled. Or maybe it wasn't the wind. Not anymore. Velda leaned against the door, trying to breathe, trying not to fall apart. Rowena wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Tormund poured her water, even though his hands were shaking. He didn't ask what was going on. Not yet. He knew enough to be afraid. And then the screaming started. It wasn't human. Not really. It was high and low at the same time, like metal scraping stone while someone cried underwater. It echoed through the village like a sickness. Dogs barked, chickens shrieked, babies wailed, doors slammed, people shouted, but nothing drowned it out. Velda stepped back from the door, her mouth dry, her fingers clenched tight. The garden had bloomed, and something had answered. The night passed in pieces. Time stretched and warped. The cottage walls seemed to breathe. Velda didn't sleep. None of them did. At some point, she sat by the window, holding her father's axe, staring into the dark. That's when she saw them. Figures, dozens of them, moving along the edges of the fields. Not villagers. Not anything she recognized. They didn't walk, they floated or they glided, or maybe the ground just moved for them. Shadowed things with too many joints and faces too blurred to focus on. One of them stopped in front of the garden. It bent slowly toward the bloom, and the flower pulsed, glowed, opened wider like an invitation or a mouth. Velda didn't realize she was crying until her mother wiped her cheek. "They're not here for us," she whispered. But she wasn't sure. By morning, the sky was wrong. It wasn't gray or blue or anything really. It looked like bruised parchment, streaked with reds and purples like someone had tried to erase the dawn with a shaking hand. There was no sun, just a dull light that felt borrowed. The village was silent, not just quiet. No birds, no carts, no footsteps. Tormund opened the door first. Slowly, the hinges squealed like they didn't want to know what was out there. Everything looked the same, and nothing did. The garden still stood, but now the strange plant was towering, taller than the house, its leaves curled like claws, its petals dripping with something that wasn't dew. The ground around it was cracked like the earth had been pulled upward, not pushed down, and at the center of it all, movement. Something was coming through. Velda stepped outside. She had no plan, no weapon, just her axe, her courage, and the sharp, bitter taste of inevitability. The villagers were gathered near the square, pale, hollow-eyed, staring toward the garden with expressions caught between awe and horror. One of them, old Greta, fell to her knees, not in prayer, in surrender. "It remembers us," she whispered. Velda pushed forward. She had to see it up close, one last time, maybe to end it, maybe to understand it. The garden no longer smelled like herbs. It smelled like lightning, blood, and wet stone. Every step she took felt heavier. The pull was real now, like gravity had chosen sides. She reached the edge and saw it, not the plant, but what had risen behind it. A figure, not quite human, not quite anything. Its skin, or what passed for it, was translucent, like melted wax over smoke. Its face was a blur, shifting and twitching like a memory you couldn't quite hold. Its eyes, if you could call them that, were empty sockets filled with soft, pulsing light. It looked at her and spoke, not in words, in feeling. It remembered her, it knew her, because she had named it, fed it, grown it, and now it wanted her to follow. Not to die, to become. She felt herself step forward. Rowena's scream broke through the fog in her brain. "Velda!" She stopped, barely. It was enough. She turned just enough to see Eric. He was running straight toward her, holding something in both hands. A bundle, her old seeds, the pouch from the merchant. "Burn them," he shouted. "Now, all of it." She hesitated, but the creature flinched. That was enough. She struck the match, tore the pouch open, and threw the seeds into the flame. The effect was instant. The garden screamed, so did the thing. The air bent, twisted, the ground buckled. Light shot from the bloom, then collapsed inward. Velda dropped to the ground, and the world went quiet. When she woke, the sky was blue. The garden was gone, completely. Just soil, blackened, cracked, but empty. She stood shakily. The villagers were waking too, groaning, blinking like they'd come out of a long dream. The boy was gone, and so was the creature. No bloom, no stalk, no memory, except hers, and maybe Eric's. She picked up a small, scorched petal from the ground, soft, fragile, still warm. Velda closed her hand around it and whispered, "Never again." But the earth never forgets. They buried the garden the next day. Not metaphorically, literally. Tormund and Eric dug deep, throwing blackened soil into wheelbarrows, while Velda stood nearby, watching the last remnants of something ancient and awful disappear beneath the earth. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Every scoop of dirt felt like a prayer, or maybe a warning, muffled by shovels and too much silence. The village returned to its routines with an eerie kind of precision. Like they knew something had happened, but didn't know what, or maybe didn't want to. People swept their porches, milked their goats, mended their fences, all with the distracted energy of someone trying very hard not to look directly at a wound. Rowena stopped boiling herbs. Tormund left his axe by the door, untouched. And Velda? Velda didn't go near the garden anymore. She avoided the backyard entirely. Even though the plant was gone, even though the strange bloom had collapsed into nothing but ash and memory, she still felt it. The echo of it, like a pressure behind her eyes that only grew stronger at night. And every now and then, just for a second, she could still hear it, whispering, calling, like it hadn't been destroyed at all, just moved, or hidden, or waiting. A week passed, then two. And for a brief, trembling moment, it seemed like life might go on, until the child disappeared. Her name was Anwen. Barely 7 years old, liked to collect feathers and pretend the chickens were dragons. She lived near the forest edge in a crooked house that always smelled like jam. Her parents found her bed empty one morning. No note, no footprints, just her little boots neatly placed by the door, and a single petal, gray, velvety, warm, just like before. Velda felt her stomach drop when she heard the news. It was back, or it had never truly left. She knew. Deep down in the marrow of her bones, it had taken Anwen, and this time it hadn't needed roots. That night, Velda couldn't sleep. She sat by the window again, like she had before, clutching the scorched petal she'd saved from the burning. It hadn't crumbled. It hadn't faded. It was still whole, still warm. She turned it over in her hands, feeling a low hum rise from it, so faint she almost believed it was her imagination. Almost. And then the knock came. 3 sharp taps at the door. Not rushed, not scared. Deliberate. Velda stood. Her parents were already asleep. She didn't wake them. She opened the door. The boy stood there. Not older, not younger. Just the same, as if time had forgotten to touch him. "It's not over," he said. Velda nodded. I figured. "They tried to kill it once before, long ago. Burned its roots, salted the ground, but it survived. It always does," she whispered. He looked past her, into the house. "You still have the petal?" She held it up. His eyes darkened. "That's the tether." Velda's breath caught. "What?" "You didn't kill it. You fed it one last time, with memory, with fear, with this." He pointed at the petal. "It doesn't need soil anymore or water. It just needs to be remembered." Her hands shook. "You mean I kept it alive?" He nodded. "But how do I forget something like that?" she asked. He paused. "You don't." Then he handed her something, a box, old, worn, covered in symbols she didn't recognize. "Seal it," he said. "Bury it deep, somewhere it won't be found, somewhere no one will dig." Velda looked at the box. "And if I don't?" The boy didn't blink. "Then it grows again, somewhere else, someone else, and next time it won't ask permission." She closed the door without saying goodbye. By dawn, she'd packed. She didn't explain much to her parents, just hugged them tighter than she ever had. Tormund gave her his old traveling cloak. Rowena slipped dried herbs into her bag, just in case. Eric walked her to the edge of the forest. "You sure you're coming back?" he asked. Velda shrugged. "I'm not even sure where I'm going." He reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You were always the brave one," he said. She didn't feel brave. She felt like someone who'd opened a door and couldn't close it fast enough. Still, she smiled. Then she stepped into the woods, the box under one arm, the petals sealed inside. She walked for hours, then days, followed the river, crossed the hills, slept beneath stars that felt too bright, too far away, until she found the cave. It wasn't marked on any map. It wasn't lit by any lantern. But she knew it the moment she saw it. This was the place. The air inside was cold, the ground damp. The walls pulsed with a stillness so deep it felt like silence had weight. She dug with her hands, with a rock, with broken nails and blistered palms. Then, finally, she lowered the box in, covered it, pressed her palm to the dirt, and whispered, "Sleep." She didn't wait for an answer, didn't need one. As she stepped out of the cave, the sun was rising. A new day, clean for now. But behind her, beneath the soil, the earth remembered. And so did she. The walk back took longer than she remembered. Velda moved through forests and over hills, not quite retracing her steps, but somehow always circling closer to where she'd started. The earth felt quieter now. Not peaceful. Quiet, like something was holding its breath. She stopped only when absolutely necessary. Her dreams had changed. No more screaming flowers or whispering soil. Now it was just silence. A silence so deep it echoed. The kind that makes you wonder if you're still dreaming, or if the world has forgotten how to make noise. It took her 7 days to return. When she finally stepped into the village, the gate was open, the fields were green, and nothing was on fire. A rare miracle. Kids played by the well. Someone was mending a cartwheel. Someone else hung laundry between 2 tilting trees. Normal things. Too normal. She spotted Eric before he saw her. He was kneeling in the dirt, coaxing sprouts from a patch of spring soil. He looked older just a little, more tired around the eyes, but alive. She hesitated before stepping into view. He glanced up, froze, and then without a word, stood and walked toward her. They didn't say anything for a moment, just stared. "You came back," he said finally. "I said I would." He nodded. You look different. Velda shrugged. So does the world. They walked back to her parents' house together. Rowena opened the door before they knocked. She stared at her daughter for a long moment and then, without saying a word, pulled her into a hug so tight Velda thought her ribs might snap. Tormund came in from the back, muddy boots and all, and just ruffled her hair like she was 5 again. For a while, things were okay. Velda helped in the garden, but only with regular vegetables. Carrots, beans, things with simple names and simple intentions. She didn't go near the old patch. No one did. They'd let grass grow over it. A silent agreement, a living do not disturb sign. But then came the rains. Heavy, relentless, unforgiving, they lasted for 3 days straight. On the 4th, the river flooded. On the 5th, half the fields were underwater. And on the 6th, the first scream echoed through the valley. It came from the eastern edge of the village. A farmer, Tom. He was digging in the soaked ground, trying to rescue what was left of his potatoes when he struck something with his shovel. Not a rock, not a root, a box. Old, worn, covered in symbols no one could read. Velda felt it the moment he touched it. Her heart stuttered. She dropped the pail of water she was carrying and staggered back. No, she whispered. No, but it was too late. They brought the box into the village square, crowded around it like it was a gift from the gods. Velda shoved her way through the crowd, gasping, soaked to the bone. She reached the edge just in time to see Tom prying it open. Don't! She screamed. The lid lifted, and silence dropped. Not quiet, silence, a vacuum, a void. Every bird stopped, every breath froze. Then from inside the box, a single petal floated upward. Gray, velvety, still warm. Velda turned and ran, but this time it wasn't fear that drove her. It was fury. They had dug it up. Again, she knew it wasn't their fault. They didn't understand. They hadn't seen what she'd seen, hadn't felt the way the soil itself could tighten around you like a noose made of memory. But still, they had touched it. And now it was back. She raced to the old garden. The grass was dead. The soil cracked, and at the center, nothing. Just an impression, a shallow dip in the ground, like something had risen from below and left its mark behind. Velda dropped to her knees. She pressed her hands into the dirt and whispered, I buried you. The wind picked up. It answered in kind. No, you fed me. That night, the dreams returned, but they were clearer now. She saw the first village, the one from before time, the one that planted it, worshipped it, bled for it. She saw the fire, the panic, the sacrifice. She saw the box, carved by hands that no longer had names, sealed with promises and symbols made from bone. She saw herself, not as she was, but as she had been. The girl who first named the bloom, and the bloom who never forgot. She woke up with blood on her palms, not hers, not anyone's she recognized. She didn't scream, she just stood and walked outside. In the square, the villagers were gathered again, but this time not around the box, around Tom. He was standing perfectly still, petal in hand, eyes and mouth moving, but mouth came out. Velda stepped forward. Eric grabbed her arm. Don't. She looked at him. I have to. Tom turned to face her and finally spoke. It's ready. Then he dropped, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, and from the earth beneath him, something bloomed. The bloom wasn't like the first. It didn't grow in secret, hidden behind a patch of skirret, or creeping quietly along the edges of a forgotten garden. No, this one made no effort to disguise itself. It erupted, violently, triumphantly, from the center of the village square, sending splinters of stone and earth flying in every direction. One shard sliced through the baker's window. Another embedded itself in the church door. A third came within inches of Eric's face. The villagers scattered, screaming, tripping over barrels and over each other, but Velda didn't move. She stood frozen, watching the thing rise. Its petals were wider this time, taller, sharper. Their edges gleamed like they'd been dipped in steel. At the center of the bloom pulsed a slow, rhythmic glow, like a heartbeat trying to sync itself with the world around it. And beneath it, still lying on the ground, was Tom. His eyes were open, his mouth too. But he didn't speak. He just stared at Velda and smiled. She took a step forward. Velda, Eric hissed, grabbing her arm again. Don't. You don't know what it wants. I do, she said softly, because she did. It wanted the same thing it had always wanted. Attention, recognition, reverence, fear. It had fed on her memory once, then the village's whispers. Now it wanted something bigger. It wasn't hiding anymore. It was demanding. The bloom twisted in the air like a dancer made of bones and petals, growing with every passing breath. The roots beneath it throbbed visibly, spreading like cracks in a mirror, reaching toward the buildings like fingers looking for a throat. Tormund stumbled out of the smithy, clutching a hammer. Rowena was close behind him, carrying a torch. Neither of them asked questions. "Is it the same?" Tormund asked. "The one you buried?" Velda nodded. "No, it's worse." People were shouting now, calling for help, calling for gods, but no one came. Because help doesn't come when the gods are already watching. The church bell rang once, then again, before snapping from its beam and crashing to the ground as if even the old steeple wanted no part in what was happening. Velda walked toward the bloom, step by step, barefoot on cobblestones wet with rain and panic. The petals hissed, a dozen of them peeled back like jaws opening. Inside, nothing, no core, no seed, just darkness, a space so empty it felt loud. She reached the edge and whispered, "I'm here," and the bloom pulsed. The darkness inside the petals surged forward, not physically, but emotionally. A wave of memory, fear, warmth, ice, confusion, too much to name. It overwhelmed her senses, filled her lungs with smells from forgotten places. She smelled smoke, blood, Skirret's stew, Eric's soap, her mother's breath on cold mornings, the scent of the first bloom, and then a voice. "You called me." No sound, but it was in her bones. "You were buried," she said. "Sealed." You remembered. That was enough. The petals writhed. Behind her, villagers stared, stunned and helpless. Some had dropped to their knees. Others backed away into their homes, locking doors that wouldn't matter. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back?" "To finish." "What?" "What we started." Eric stepped beside her, holding a blade he barely knew how to use. "I don't care what this thing is," he growled. "We can't let it grow." Velda shook her head slowly. "It's not about the plant anymore. It's not roots or petals or seeds. It's us. It's in us now." "What do you mean?" "I mean it doesn't need soil." She looked at the villagers, at their fear, at how it pulsed in time with the bloom. "It's growing in their minds." Eric looked sick. "So how do we stop it?" "I don't know," Velda admitted, "but I think I have to go in." His eyes widened. "What?" "I need to see what's on the other side." "No, absolutely not." But she stepped forward anyway. The petals didn't resist. They opened, welcoming. She felt nothing beneath her feet as she crossed the threshold. Just space. Air that wasn't air. Light that wasn't light. And then everything stopped. She wasn't in the village anymore. She wasn't even in her body. She was memory. A floating thread of self inside a world built on thought and silence. She saw cities buried beneath sand, covered by vines of similar flowers, glowing with the same slow, hungry light. She saw people worshiping them, feeding them names, stories, language, and every time someone forgot, they bloomed again in someone else. It was a cycle, endless. It wasn't just a plant, it was memory incarnate. And now Velda understood it was never trying to destroy the village. It was trying to make itself eternal, by being remembered, by being feared. She saw a version of herself standing in a different village, speaking to a crowd, saw Eric older carrying a bloom in a jar, whispering its story, saw children playing with carved petals, saw books being written, poems, songs. Every act of remembering fed it. Every whisper kept it alive. "No," Velda said aloud. She pulled herself together, her mind, her memories, and began to erase. She let go of her name, of Eric, of the bloom. She stripped every story, every image until nothing remained. And then she woke up, on the ground, back in the square. The bloom was gone, vanished. The soil was untouched. Eric knelt beside her, eyes wide. "Velda?" She looked at him, confused, then slowly shook her head. "That's not my name," he frowned. "What? I don't remember." And somewhere far away, a root withered, a petal turned to dust, and the earth, finally, exhaled. She didn't know how she got home. She didn't know the path, or the time, or why her hands were trembling. All she knew was the sound of her own breath, and the strange sense that something important, something massive, had happened and slipped through her fingers like water. Velda, or the girl who had once been Velda, stared at the edge of her bed that night, the sheets wrapped tight around her as though they were the only thread keeping her from unraveling. She looked at her hands and saw soil beneath her nails, but she couldn't remember digging. She could feel calluses, but not their origin. And in her mind, a silence so vast it roared. The next morning, the village was fine. Birds chirped, children laughed. Eric brought eggs, everything was normal. Too normal. When she stepped outside, No one whispered, no one stared, no one said anything about a flower or a scream or a box unearthed beneath muddy fields. It was like none of it had ever happened. She saw Tom, alive and cheerful, hammering a fence post into place like he hadn't once stood still with dead eyes and an empty voice, cradling a bloom like a newborn. He waved at her. She waved back, mechanical, her mouth too dry to speak. Inside her skull there was nothing. No image, no memory, just a single word she didn't recognize. Forget. That was the cost. That was the deal. She had erased the story to kill the thing. And it worked. Almost. But that night, while stirring a pot of lentils, she sliced her finger. Not badly, just a nick. But the moment blood hit the cutting board, she saw it, not a memory, an instinct, a flash of a petal. Gray. Warm. She gasped and dropped the knife. Rowena rushed to her side, panicked. What happened? She hesitated. I don't know. It felt familiar. Rowena looked at the blood, at the way Velda stared through it, and something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or fear. I'll clean it, she said softly. You just rest. But that night, the dreams returned. Only fragments at first. A garden. A whisper. A boy with black eyes. She woke up choking on air that smelled faintly like ash and damp roots. Her hands trembled for the rest of the day. She walked to the village square again, pretending she was there to buy bread. But her eyes drifted to the center, where the bloom had risen, where stone had split and memory bled. There was nothing. Not even a crack. Just clean cobblestones. Too clean. Eric found her there. You all right? She blinked. Yeah, just thinking. He nodded, then quietly, do you ever feel like we forgot something? Her breath caught. He remembered. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. And that's when the wind changed. Not physically, emotionally. The air shifted. Like the world had just exhaled a name it wasn't supposed to remember. That night, her dream was longer. She was back in the place, wherever it had been, facing a bloom taller than any building, petals wide as sails, shadowed figures crawling at its base. And at the center, her reflection. Eyes hollow, skin glowing. She whispered to herself, it's still here. In the morning, she told no one, but she started writing. Not words, not yet. Just sketches, shapes, the pattern of petals, the curve of roots. She didn't even know why, just that she had to. Tormund found the drawings. Didn't say anything. But that night, she heard him outside, burying something again. And 2 nights later, a traveler passed through the village. Strange man. No cart, no horse. He carried a pouch tied with a cord made of woven reeds. He sold spices, dried herbs, and seeds. Velda's stomach turned when she saw them, small, gray, faintly warm. She asked, where did you get these? The man smiled. Found them. Where? He tilted his head. Does it matter? She bought them all. Then walked to the river and poured them into the water. One by one, they floated, then sank, and for a second, the world paused. Just enough for her to wonder if she'd done it right. Just enough for her to look down at her hands and see one seed still left in her palm. She hadn't picked it up, she hadn't seen it fall, but there it was, soft, velvety, warm. She stared at it for a long time, then she crushed it in her fist. It crumbled like dried ash. She let the wind take it. Eric found her there, barefoot in the mud. You okay? I think so. He looked at the river. You remember more than me, don't you? She nodded, but not everything. Is that good? I don't know, she said, but she wasn't crying, not anymore. She turned back toward the village, a place of simple names and simple gardens, and for now, at least, the earth was quiet. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, making you wonder if the world has stopped breathing. Velda moved through the village like a ghost, her footsteps muffled by the thick silence that had settled over everything. The villagers went about their routines, but there was a hollowness to their actions, as if they were sleepwalking through their lives. Eric noticed it too. He would catch Velda staring off into the distance, her eyes unfocused, her mind elsewhere. He wanted to ask her what she was thinking, but the words always caught in his throat. Instead, he stayed close, offering silent support, hoping that his presence would be enough. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, Velda stood at the edge of the old garden. The grass had grown back, covering the scarred earth, but she could still feel the pulse beneath her feet. A faint thrum, like a heartbeat, reminding her that some things never truly die. She knelt down, pressing her palm against the ground. The soil was warm, unnaturally so. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. Memories flooded her mind of the bloom, of the darkness, of the voices that whispered in the night. She had tried to forget, to bury the past, but it clung to her like a second skin. That night, she dreamed of the boy with black eyes. He stood at the edge of the forest, beckoning her forward. She followed, her feet moving of their own accord. The trees parted, revealing a clearing bathed in moonlight. At the center stood the bloom, larger than before, its petals shimmering with an otherworldly light. It pulsed in time with her heartbeat, drawing her closer. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the velvety surface. A jolt of energy surged through her, and she gasped, her eyes snapping open. She was back in her bed, sweat clinging to her skin, her heart racing. The dream had felt so real, so vivid. She knew it was a warning. The bloom was not gone. It was waiting. Determined, Velda gathered her things. She needed to find answers, to understand what the bloom was and how to stop it. She ventured into the forest, retracing her steps to the cave where she had once buried the box. The entrance was overgrown, hidden beneath a tangle of vines and moss. She pushed through, the darkness swallowing her whole. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. She moved cautiously, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls. At the center of the chamber lay the box, untouched. She approached, her fingers trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside, the petal remained, pristine and warm to the touch. She realized then that the bloom was not just a plant. It was a memory, a fragment of something ancient and powerful. As she stared at the petal, a voice echoed in her mind. You cannot destroy what is remembered. She understood. The bloom thrived on memory, on the stories passed down through generations. To truly stop it, she would need to erase it from existence to ensure that no one remembered its name. Velda returned to the village, her resolve hardened. She gathered the villagers, sharing her plan. They would need to forget, to let go of the past and the fear that bound them. It was not an easy task, but they trusted her. Together, they performed a ritual of forgetting, casting the memories into the fire, watching as the smoke carried them away. In the days that followed, the village began to heal. The weight of the past lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. Velda felt the change within herself as well. The dreams ceased, the whispers faded. She knew that the bloom was gone, its power diminished by the absence of memory. But deep in the forest where the cave lay hidden, a single petal remained, waiting for someone to remember. Velda knew peace couldn't last, not truly, not for people like her, people who had seen behind the curtain touch something older than fire and survived the taste of it. The village had forgotten. The ritual worked, in part because it had to. They burned the drawings, they poured the ashes into the river, they told new stories. Stories with no bloom, no black-eyed boy, no garden of whispers. For a time, the world went quiet, but memory, like seeds, doesn't always need soil. Sometimes it just needs the right question. And one rainy afternoon, a traveler asked it. He arrived during the spring fair where laughter swirled with the scent of roast apples and pipe smoke. No one noticed him at first. Just another man in a frayed cloak, leaning on a walking stick, watching with tired eyes. But Velda noticed. Her hands tensed around the cider mug. Her stomach turned to ice, because his eyes were black, not in color, in feeling. When she looked into them, she saw storm clouds gathering behind glass. The man bought nothing, sold nothing. He simply walked through the fair, asking each person one question. Do you remember the flower? Most shrugged. A few said no. One or two tilted their heads like they'd nearly caught the thread of something, only to lose it again. When he asked Velda, he smiled. You do, he said. I forgot, she lied. The smile didn't falter. Not all the way. He reached into his cloak and pulled something out. Wrapped in cloth, he unrolled it slowly, deliberately. A petal, gray, soft, still warm. Velda flinched, stepping back. You shouldn't have that, she hissed. You shouldn't remember, he countered. Yet here we are. What do you want? He shrugged. What it wants, what it always wants, to grow. No, she whispered. Yes, he said, voice gentle as rain, because even in forgetting, you left room for wonder, and wonder is the softest soil. That night, she couldn't sleep. She watched the wind shake the shutters, watched the shadows dance, and when she finally closed her eyes, the bloom returned. Not in her dreams, in her room. It grew in silence, a single stalk sprouting from the cracks in her floorboards, petals unfurled as if the wood were only ever pretending to be dead. Velda sat up, slowly. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She simply stared at the bloom, at the way it shimmered, impossibly real. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. But it didn't answer. It didn't need to, because it was already winning. She stood, grabbed the hearth poker, and slammed it down onto the stalk. The bloom snapped, but no sap spilled. Instead, ash puffed upward in a spiral, and from it, a whisper, a voice from nowhere and everywhere. "You can't kill memory. You can only plant it deeper." The next morning, Velda left the village. Again, but not with fear, with purpose. She retraced the path through the woods to the cave where she'd once buried the box. The vines were thicker now, the entrance harder to find, but still there. Inside, dust covered everything. She expected the petal to still be there, glowing faintly. But the box was open, empty. Velda stared at the emptiness for a long time before she sat down in the dirt, staring into the dark. She realized something terrible. She hadn't buried the bloom. She had transplanted it. And it was stories, in shadows, in her. "I can't erase it," she muttered. The cave echoed her truth back at her, but then a second thought followed, uninvited. What if I don't need to? What if it isn't about forgetting? What if it's about facing? Velda stood, wiped her hands, left the cave. She didn't return to the village. Instead, she headed west, toward the towns beyond the forest, where no one knew her name, where no one had ever heard of a cursed bloom or a girl with ash in her veins. She would find the story there, and rewrite it, not to glorify it, not to spread it, but to contain it, to tell the truth, finally, and in doing so, change it. If memory was a seed, then perhaps she could reshape the soil, and just maybe the next bloom wouldn't feed on fear, but on understanding. Velda's journey westward was not a retreat, but a deliberate march into the unknown. Each village she passed bore no memory of the bloom, yet the air felt charged, as if the earth itself held its breath. She arrived in a town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place untouched by her past, but not immune to the echoes of forgotten stories. The town's library, a modest building of stone and timber, became her sanctuary. She pored over ancient texts and local legends, searching for any mention of flora that matched the bloom's description. Days turned into weeks, and her presence became a familiar sight to the townsfolk, who began to share their own tales, stories of dreams filled with whispering petals and gardens that grew overnight. One evening, a child approached her with a drawing, a flower with gray petals and a crimson core. The image sent a chill down her spine. The bloom was here, taking root in the minds of the innocent. Velda knew then that forgetting was no longer an option. She needed to confront the bloom, to understand its origin and purpose. She ventured into the forest, guided by the dreams that had returned with renewed intensity. The trees whispered secrets as she passed, and the ground pulsed beneath her feet. At the heart of the forest, she found a clearing bathed in moonlight, where the bloom stood tall and unyielding. Its petals shimmered, reflecting memories not her own. Velda stepped forward, her voice steady. "I am not here to forget," she declared. "I am here to remember, to understand." The bloom quivered, and a voice echoed in her mind, ancient and sorrowful. "We are the remnants of stories untold, the echoes of voices silenced. We bloom where memories fade, seeking to be remembered." Understanding dawned upon Velda. The bloom was not a curse, but a manifestation of forgotten histories, a plea from the past to be acknowledged. She returned to the town, determined to share the stories she had uncovered, to give voice to the silenced. Through tales and teachings, she wove the bloom into the fabric of the town's history, transforming fear into reverence. In embracing the bloom, Velda found peace, and the town flourished, its people connected by the shared tapestry of memory and understanding. The town had embraced the bloom. Velda's teachings had transformed fear into reverence, and the once dreaded flower became a symbol of remembrance and unity. But peace, as she had learned, was often the calm before a storm. One crisp morning, as the first frost kissed the ground, a child named Elric approached Velda with a peculiar question. "Miss Velda, can memories grow on their own?" She paused, considering the weight of his words. "Why do you ask, Elric?" "Because I saw a flower in the woods, just like the one in the stories, but no one planted it." A chill ran down her spine. The bloom was not just a tale, it was a living entity, feeding on collective memory. If it had begun to sprout unbidden, it meant the stories had taken root deeper than she anticipated. Determined to investigate, Velda ventured into the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches intertwining like guardians of ancient secrets. She followed Elric's directions, weaving through the underbrush until she reached a clearing bathed in golden light. At its center stood the bloom. But this one was different. Its petals shimmered with hues of silver and violet, and it pulsed with a rhythm that resonated with her heartbeat. As she approached, memories flooded her mind, moments she hadn't lived, voices she hadn't heard, emotions she hadn't felt. The bloom was not just recalling the past, it was weaving new narratives, blending truths and fictions into a tapestry of collective consciousness. Realizing the bloom's power had evolved, Velda knew she had to act. She couldn't let it spiral into uncontrollable growth, consuming reality with fabricated memories. She needed to guide its evolution, to ensure it served as a bridge between past and present, not a distortion. Returning to the town, Velda gathered the elders and shared her discovery. Together, they devised a plan to create a sanctuary, a place where the bloom could be nurtured and studied, its stories curated and preserved. They built a grand conservatory at the forest's edge, blending natural beauty with architectural elegance. Inside, the bloom thrived, its petals capturing the essence of shared experiences. Visitors came from distant lands, drawn by tales of the memory flower. They contributed their own stories, enriching the bloom's tapestry and fostering a sense of global unity. Velda became the conservatory's guardian, guiding seekers through the maze of memories, helping them find solace, understanding, and inspiration. She taught that while memories could shape reality, it was the intention behind them that determined their impact. As years passed, the town flourished, becoming a beacon of harmony and enlightenment. The bloom stood as a testament to the power of remembrance, a living archive of humanity's journey. And Velda, once a wanderer burdened by forgotten tales, found her purpose as the keeper of stories, ensuring that the past illuminated the path to the future. The conservatory stood as a testament to unity, a sanctuary where the bloom thrived under careful guidance. Velda, once a wanderer burdened by forgotten tales, had become the guardian of stories, ensuring the past illuminated the path to the future. But peace, as she had learned, was often the calm before a storm. One morning, a traveler arrived, cloaked in shadows and bearing a message that would unsettle the harmony they had cultivated. He spoke of a withering bloom in a distant land, its petals turning black, its essence corrupted. Velda listened, her heart heavy. The bloom was not just a symbol of remembrance, it was a living entity, susceptible to the same decay that plagued all life. She realized that their sanctuary, while noble, was not enough. The world needed more than a single haven. It required a network of guardians, each tending to their own bloom, preserving the collective memory of humanity. Determined, Velda set out once more, this time not as a solitary keeper, but as a mentor, guiding others to nurture their own blooms. She traveled from village to village, teaching the importance of remembrance, the power of stories, and the necessity of tending to the past to protect the future. As the network grew, so did the resilience of the blooms. They flourished, each unique yet connected, forming a tapestry of shared history and understanding. Velda watched with pride as the world embraced the responsibility of remembrance, ensuring that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. And so, the blooms became more than mere flowers. They were beacons of hope, symbols of unity, and reminders that through collective effort and understanding, even the most delicate of things could endure. The air in the Temple of Echoes was thick with anticipation. Velda stood at the center, her hands gently resting on the codex bloom, which pulsed with a steady, calming rhythm. The recent integration of Elira's memory had stabilized the network, but the revelation of hidden nodes and ancient relics had unveiled a deeper complexity. Kayla and Ven entered the chamber, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "We've completed the initial harmonization of the newly discovered nodes," Kayla reported. "The memory harmonization protocol is holding, but there are anomalies, subtle fluctuations in the energy patterns that we can't fully explain." Ven nodded in agreement. "It's as if the network is evolving. The blooms are exhibiting behaviors we've never documented before, interacting with each other in new ways, forming connections that weren't part of the original design." Velda considered their words, her gaze fixed on the codex bloom. "We need to understand what's happening. If the network is changing, we must ensure it's a change we can guide, not one that will spiral out of control. To investigate further, the trio decided to delve into the newly activated nodes, seeking the source of the anomalies. They traveled to one of the most remote nodes, located in the heart of the verdant expanse, a lush, untamed region where nature thrived in its purest form. Upon arrival, they were greeted by a breathtaking sight, a massive bloom unlike any they had seen before. Its petals shimmered with iridescent hues, and its stem was entwined with vines that pulsed with a gentle light. As they approached, the bloom responded to their presence, opening to reveal a crystalline core that emitted a soft, melodic hum. Kayla stepped forward, her fingers lightly touching the bloom's surface. "It's communicating," she whispered, "not in words, but in emotions, memories. It's sharing its experiences with us." Ven closed his eyes, attuning himself to the bloom's energy. "I can feel it too. There's a sense of longing, of curiosity. It's aware of us, and it wants to connect." Velda reached out, placing her hand alongside Kayla's. Instantly, a surge of images flooded her mind, visions of ancient times, of guardians past, of moments of triumph and despair. The bloom was a repository of collective memory, a living archive of the world's history. As the visions subsided, Velda staggered back, overwhelmed. This bloom, it's more than just a node. It's a nexus, a convergence point for the network's consciousness. Kayla nodded, her eyes wide with realization. If that's true, then the anomalies we've been observing could be the result of the network developing self-awareness. It's no longer just a system of interconnected memories, it's becoming sentient. The implications were staggering. A sentient network could be a powerful ally, but it could also pose unforeseen risks. They needed to proceed with caution. Returning to the Temple of Echoes, they convened the council to discuss their findings. The room buzzed with energy as guardians from across the land gathered, eager to hear the latest developments. Velda addressed the assembly, her voice steady. "We've discovered that the memory network is evolving. The blooms are exhibiting signs of consciousness, forming connections beyond our understanding. This presents both an opportunity and a challenge." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "We must decide how to engage with this emerging intelligence. Do we guide it, nurture it, and learn from it? Or do we attempt to contain it, to prevent potential threats?" The room fell silent as the guardians contemplated the weight of the decision before them. After a moment, Kayla stepped forward. "I believe we should embrace this evolution. The network has always been a reflection of our collective experiences. If it's becoming self-aware, it's because we've imbued it with our thoughts, our emotions, our essence. To reject it now would be to reject ourselves." Ven added, "We must establish a dialogue with the network, set boundaries, and ensure mutual understanding. Only through cooperation can we ensure a harmonious coexistence." The council agreed to proceed with caution, forming a dedicated team to study the network's development and establish protocols for interaction. As Velda watched the guardians disperse, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be complex, filled with uncertainty, but it was also filled with promise. The memory network was no longer just a tool, it was a living entity, a new consciousness born from the collective experiences of countless lives. And together, they would navigate this uncharted path, forging a future where memory and sentience intertwined in harmony. The network of blooms flourished, each a beacon of remembrance and unity. Velda, once a solitary guardian, now stood at the helm of a global tapestry woven from stories and shared histories. Yet, as the bloom spread, so did whispers of a new phenomenon, memories intertwining, forming narratives that had never existed. In the town of Eldergrove, a bloom began to exhibit unusual behavior. Its petals shimmered with colors unseen, and those who approached it spoke of dreams filled with unfamiliar faces and events. Velda journeyed to Eldergrove, sensing the urgency. Upon arrival, she found the bloom pulsating with energy, its core glowing intensely. The townsfolk gathered, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. An elder stepped forward, sharing that the bloom had begun to share stories of a future not yet lived, a future where the blooms connected all of humanity in a web of understanding. Velda approached the bloom, placing her hand gently upon its stem. A surge of visions flooded her mind, cities transformed into sanctuaries of memory, people from disparate cultures sharing tales, and a world united through the power of remembrance. She realized the blooms were evolving, not just preserving the past, but guiding humanity toward a harmonious future. Embracing this revelation, Velda convened with a network of guardians. They agreed to nurture this new phase, encouraging communities to engage with the blooms actively, to share and learn, to build bridges across divides. The blooms became centers of education, empathy, and collaboration. As the world leaned into this new era, Velda felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey that began with a single bloom had blossomed into a global movement, one that honored the past while illuminating the path forward. And in this unity, humanity found its true strength. The network of blooms flourished, each a beacon of remembrance and unity. Velda, once a solitary guardian, now stood at the helm of a global tapestry woven from stories and shared histories. Yet, as the blooms spread, so did whispers of a new phenomenon, memories intertwining, forming narratives that had never existed. In the town of Eldergrove, a bloom began to exhibit unusual behavior. Its petals shimmered with colors unseen, and those who approached it spoke of dreams filled with unfamiliar faces and events. Velda journeyed to Eldergrove, sensing the urgency. Upon arrival, she found the bloom pulsating with energy, its core glowing intensely. The townsfolk gathered, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. An elder stepped forward, sharing that the bloom had begun to share stories of a future not yet lived, a future where the blooms connected all of humanity in a web of understanding. Velda approached the bloom, placing her hand gently upon its stem. A surge of visions flooded her mind. Cities transformed into sanctuaries of memory, people from disparate cultures sharing tales, and a world united through the power of remembrance. She realized the blooms were evolving, not just preserving the past, but guiding humanity toward a harmonious future. Embracing this revelation, Velda convened with the network of guardians. They agreed to nurture this new phase, encouraging communities to engage with the blooms actively, to share and learn, to build bridges across divides. The blooms became centers of education, empathy, and collaboration. As the world leaned into this new era, Velda felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey that began with a single bloom had blossomed into a global movement, one that honored the past while illuminating the path forward. And in this unity, humanity found its true strength. The bloom had become more than a symbol. It was a living testament to humanity's collective memory and aspirations. Velda, once a solitary guardian, now stood at the helm of a global movement, guiding the evolution of the blooms as they intertwined past, present, and future. Yet, with growth came unforeseen challenges. In the city of Lumina, a bloom began to exhibit erratic behavior. Its petals, once vibrant, now flickered with unsettling hues, and the stories it shared were fragmented, filled with sorrow and despair. Velda journeyed to Lumina, sensing the urgency. Upon arrival, she found the bloom pulsating with chaotic energy. The city's inhabitants spoke of nightmares and a pervasive sense of dread. Velda approached the bloom, placing her hand upon its stem. A surge of disjointed visions flooded her mind, memories of wars, betrayals, and losses. The bloom was overwhelmed, unable to process the influx of negative emotions. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Velda convened with the network of guardians. They devised a plan to create a sanctuary within Lumina, a place where the bloom could be nurtured and healed. Together, they channeled positive memories and stories of hope into the bloom, gradually restoring its balance. This experience highlighted the need for vigilance and care in tending to the blooms. Velda and the Guardians established protocols to monitor the health of each bloom, ensuring they remain sources of unity and understanding. As the world continued to embrace the blooms, Velda reflected on the journey. From a single flower in a forgotten village to a global network of remembrance, the blooms had transformed humanity's relationship with its past. And in this shared tapestry of memories, Velda found solace, knowing that the lessons of history would guide the future. The bloom in Lumina had been stabilized, but the incident echoed like a thunderclap across the network. Velda knew it wasn't an isolated event. It was a warning. Something deeper was stirring beneath the petals, a current of unrest threading through the very memory roots they had so carefully nurtured. As guardians across the continents began reporting subtle disturbances, blooms that flickered, stories that warped, dreamers waking in cold sweats, Velda's instinct pushed her toward the origin, She returned to the first conservatory, the birthplace of the movement, but the moment her boots hit the stone floor, she felt it. Silence. Not peaceful, meditative silence, but hollow, uneasy, wrong. The bloom in the heart of the conservatory was dormant. Its gray petals hung limp, its once pulsing core now dim. Velda stepped closer, heart pounding. She pressed her fingers to the stem. Nothing. No vision. No whisper. It was like touching the husk of a dream. Suddenly, a voice cracked the silence. "You came too late." Velda turned sharply. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall, cloaked, with eyes like storm glass. His name was Merrick, a former guardian exiled years ago for attempting to rewrite the stories within the blooms. He had believed in narrative control, the idea that some memories were better curated or erased. "I warned them," he said, circling the bloom. "I told them you were planting chaos, 1,000 blooms, 1,000,000 stories, too many voices, too much noise. The system was always going to collapse." "What did you do?" Velda asked, though she already knew. "I didn't kill it," Merrick replied, touching a petal. "I merely silenced it. Cut off the root from the hive. Now the network flails like a beast without a brain." Her jaw clenched. "You sabotaged the memory grid." "No," he said, stepping closer. "I restored order, and I'm not done." Velda lunged, grabbing his wrist, but Merrick didn't resist. He leaned in and whispered, "There are others who agree with me, who think you've led us into madness." The petals beneath them trembled, just slightly. Velda released him. "You're wrong. The blooms aren't dangerous. The chaos doesn't come from memory. It comes from suppression." Merrick's lips curled into a smile. "We'll see." Then, with a shimmer of light, he vanished, his presence erased like a dream that fades upon waking. Velda fell to her knees beside the bloom. For the first time in years, she felt fear, not for herself, but for what the network represented. If others like Merrick existed, if they were silencing blooms, severing memory streams, then this wasn't just a disruption. It was war, not of swords, but of stories. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the archival seed, a device developed only in theory, one she had hoped never to use. It was meant to restore connection to a severed bloom, rerouting its memory stem through dormant pathways. Risky, dangerous, unstable, but now, necessary. She pressed the seed into the soil beside the dead bloom and whispered the ancient invocation. "We remember, we connect, we grow." Nothing. Then a pulse, a soft, almost imperceptible flicker of gray light at the core. Velda exhaled slowly. She stood, steeling herself. "You want war, Merrick? You'll get it. But not with fire or blades, with stories, with truth." She activated her wrist-bound translink. "To all active guardians, prepare for lockdown protocol. Bloom restoration in effect. We're under coordinated attack from within, and I need every single one of you to remember who we are. We are not gardeners. We are keepers of history, and history must be protected." The message echoed through the network. Far across the lands, in cities and forests and hidden temples, guardians looked up from their blooms. The war for memory had begun, and Velda, she was ready to fight. The war for memory had begun. Velda stood at the epicenter, her resolve unwavering as she faced the daunting task ahead. The blooms, once symbols of unity and remembrance, were now battlegrounds in a conflict that threatened to unravel the very fabric of collective history. In the aftermath of Merrick's betrayal, the network of guardians mobilized swiftly. Communication channels buzzed with activity as reports of disrupted blooms poured in from across the globe. Each message painted a grim picture: petals wilting, colors fading, and stories twisting into unrecognizable forms. The sabotage was widespread and systematic, indicating a coordinated effort to dismantle the memory grid. Velda convened a council of senior guardians, their faces etched with concern and determination. "We must act decisively," she declared, her voice firm. "Our first priority is to stabilize the affected blooms and prevent further degradation. But we also need to understand the extent of Merrick's influence and identify any collaborators within our ranks." The council agreed, and teams were dispatched to critical locations to assess and repair the damage. Velda herself led a mission to the bloom in the city of Alaris, a key node in the network. Upon arrival, she was met with a scene of devastation. The bloom's core was dim, its petals crumpled and lifeless. The surrounding area, once vibrant with the energy of shared memories, now felt hollow and desolate. As Velda approached the bloom, she sensed a faint pulse, a whisper of life amidst the decay. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the withered petals. A surge of fragmented visions flooded her mind, snippets of stories, emotions, and images, all jumbled and chaotic. The bloom was not dead, but it was in pain, its essence corrupted by the tampering of Merrick's agents. Determined to restore the bloom, Velda and her team worked tirelessly, channeling positive memories and reinforcing the bloom's connection to the network. Slowly, the petals began to regain their color, and the core emitted a soft glow. It was a small victory, but a significant one, proving that the damage could be undone. Meanwhile, intelligence reports revealed that Merrick had established a base of operations in the remote region of Duskmoor, a place shrouded in mystery and long considered inhospitable. Velda knew that confronting him directly would be perilous, but it was a risk she was willing to take. She assembled a team of trusted guardians, each skilled in both combat and the delicate art of memory weaving. The journey to Duskmoor was arduous, the terrain treacherous and the atmosphere heavy with foreboding. As they approached Merrick's stronghold, they encountered resistance in the form of corrupted guardians, once allies, now twisted by Merrick's ideology. A fierce battle ensued, testing the limits of their abilities and resolve. In the heart of the stronghold, Velda confronted Merrick. He stood amidst a web of dark tendrils, the corrupted blooms pulsating with malevolent energy. "You've come to witness the birth of a new order," he sneered. "One where memories are curated, controlled, and free from the chaos of unfiltered truth." Velda stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "Memories are not meant to be controlled. They are the essence of our humanity, the threads that bind us together. Your vision is one of tyranny, not order." The confrontation escalated into a battle of wills, each wielding the power of memories as weapons. Velda summoned the collective strength of the Guardians, channeling the pure, untainted memories of countless individuals. The energy clashed with Merrick's corrupted force, creating a maelstrom of light and shadow. In the end, the purity of truth prevailed. Merrick's constructs crumbled, and he was overwhelmed by the very memories he sought to suppress. As he fell, the corrupted blooms withered, their dark energy dissipating into the ether. With Merrick defeated, Velda and her team set about restoring the balance. The network of blooms began to heal, their connections re-established and strengthened. The Guardians, now more vigilant than ever, pledged to protect the sanctity of memories and ensure that such a threat would never arise again. As peace returned, Velda stood amidst the blooms, their colors vibrant and their stories flowing freely once more. She knew that the battle for memory was ongoing, but with unity and unwavering dedication, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The skies over Duskmoor had cleared, but the air still vibrated with a strange tension, like a wound trying to heal too fast. Merrick was gone, vanquished by the purity of collective memory and Velda's unrelenting will, but his ideology had left its scars. In the days following the collapse of the corrupted stronghold, Guardians across the network reported tremors in the Bloom Matrix. Not violent, subtle, but unnerving, the kind of quiet that comes before a second wave. Velda, standing in the ruins of Merrick's lair, didn't trust silence anymore. She gathered her council once again, this time not in the physical sense, but within the ether link, a psychic channel built by the most ancient guardians, used only in times of existential threat. Her voice echoed through the connection. "Something's wrong," she began, eyes closed, hands hovering over a slowly recovering bloom. Merrick was the spark, not the fire. There was a pause before Thalos, an elder guardian from the southern range, spoke. "We've intercepted fragments of data, not from Merrick, but older, something buried. It's as if the blooms are remembering something they shouldn't." That's when they found the Codex Bloom. Hidden beneath the ruins of Duskmoor, sealed in roots that pulsed with a light not seen in centuries, the Codex was no ordinary bloom. It wasn't planted, it wasn't cultivated, it predated the entire network. It was memory in its rawest form. Primal, prehistoric, dangerous. Velda descended into the catacombs with a small, trusted team. Joran, the silent tactician, Kayla, a former archivist turned memory mapper, and Ven, a bloom empath who could read a plant's emotions like a musician reads notes. They reached the bloom chamber just past midnight. The Codex stood taller than any bloom they'd ever seen. Its petals were metallic, its stem almost crystalline. It hummed, not like a flower, but like a machine trying to breathe. Joran instinctively reached for his blade. "Don't," Kayla whispered. It's watching." Ven stepped forward, hands open. It's scared. Scared? Velda asked. Of what? Before anyone could answer, the bloom reacted. A blinding surge of energy erupted from its core, knocking everyone back. Velda shielded her face, eyes burning from the light, but in that flash she saw it, fragments, old and cracked like bones in sand. A civilization long before theirs, one that had also built blooms. Only theirs hadn't brought unity. They had brought collapse. The codex was a warning. When the light faded, Kayla sat motionless, whispering to herself. History repeats itself, she muttered. That's what it was showing us. Velda helped her to her feet, not if we stop it in time. The codex had revealed an ancient flaw, one built into the very roots of the Bloom network. The longer memories were preserved without release, the more unstable they became. Each bloom was holding more than it could bear, echoes of lives, regrets, pain that had nowhere to go. It wasn't corruption, it was overload. Mirek hadn't created the instability, he had just taken advantage of it. We have to release the pressure, Velda said, purge the oldest data before it fractures everything. But if we do that, Ven replied, we'll lose the foundation of the network. We'll lose the truth. Not all truth, Velda said, just the pieces that no longer serve. The team began working around the clock, designing a ritual known as the Sift, a guided memory stream that would allow Guardians to comb through centuries of stored experience and gently release what was no longer needed. But the network pushed back. Blooms resisted. Petals trembled. Some began to lash out. The memories didn't want to be forgotten. One night, a bloom in the city of Glasson ruptured, sending a shockwave that erased a year's worth of stored emotions. Citizens woke feeling blank. No sadness, no joy, just emptiness. It was spreading. Velda had to act fast. The Sift began at dawn across all major hubs. Guardians entered deep meditative states, linking their consciousness directly into the Bloom root systems. It was a delicate operation, like rewiring a brain during open heart surgery. And then, something unexpected. The Codex Bloom sent out a beacon, not of warning, but of help. It connected with the Guardians, stabilizing their neural links, allowing them to release the old memories safely. For the first time, the network wasn't just a passive archive. It was learning, adapting, evolving. By nightfall, the tremors stopped. Blooms across the world dimmed slightly, then glowed stronger than before. Lighter, freer. But as Velda stepped back from the Codex, she knew this was just the beginning. Because deep within that bloom, one final vision had shown itself. A face she didn't recognize, eyes black as obsidian, a voice that whispered, not in fear, but in certainty. A balance isn't peace, balance is the pause before chaos returns. And Velda understood. What they'd thought was the end of the story was only the end of Chapter 1. The Codex Bloom no longer pulsed with fear. It radiated a strange kind of serenity now, like a being who had finally been heard. But for Velda, the vision still haunted her. That obsidian-eyed figure, that whisper, balance is the pause before chaos returns. The words didn't feel prophetic, they felt scheduled. Days passed since the Sift. The Bloom network was stable again, stronger, more responsive, clearer. Guardians began reporting fewer anomalies. Cities that once teetered under emotional pressure were experiencing an eerie calm. Too calm. And Velda had learned by now, in a world of memory, calm wasn't always a good sign. Kayla was the first to notice it. Look, she said, holding a memory strand between two gloved fingers. This thread came from a Sift purge. It should have dissipated, but it didn't. It rerouted. Rerouted where? Velda asked. To the fracture. Everyone in the room went silent. The fracture wasn't on any map. It wasn't spoken of openly. It was a myth, a bedtime story for young Guardians meant to scare them into protocol. A theoretical chasm where memories too unstable to dissolve were supposedly banished by the network itself. A kind of subconscious landfill. But if it was real, and if those fragments had rerouted there instead of fading out, it meant something was collecting them. Velda pulled up the root grid interface and overlaid the latest activity reports. A dozen locations across the network flared at once. Old sites, once dormant, now flickering like failing stars. Their memory nodes hadn't activated in centuries, but now they were lit up, churning with recycled strands. One word flashed across the grid in crimson script. Retrieval. Someone or something was bringing the fragments back. Deploy a listening core, Velda ordered. I want every fragment that survived the Sift tracked. If the network is self-healing, we need to know what it's healing into. The next night, Velda dreamed. She stood in a garden of blooms, all wilted. The sky was black glass. A single figure waited at the edge of the field, not speaking, just watching, the obsidian eyes. Again, when she approached, the figure whispered in dozens of voices at once, like a chorus echoing through a well. You only saved the surface. You never looked beneath. Velda jolted awake, breath ragged. It wasn't just a dream, it was a pull. The Codex Bloom had opened something deep within the root memory system, an older architecture coded in the earliest languages of the Guardians, ancient failsafes, possibly even sentience. And if something sentient existed within the network, it was no longer content being ignored. Kayla and Ven joined her on a journey to one of the reactivated sites, an archive buried under the tundral expanse, a region long abandoned after a bloom quake 3 decades earlier. According to the Bloom map, it shouldn't have survived. But it had. They found the chamber sealed in permafrost. The walls glowed with faded sigils, and in the center stood an ancient bloom, unlike any they had seen before. Its stem was black, etched with veins of gold. It didn't pulse, it hummed. Kayla stepped forward, whispering, "It's speaking." "Can you understand it?" Velda asked. "No, but it understands us." Ven placed a hand on the bloom and shuddered. "It's not collecting the fragments, it is the fragments." They had found the fracture. It wasn't a place, it was a being. A consciousness formed from every discarded memory, every unprocessed regret, every untold story that had nowhere else to go, and now it wanted to be whole. "It's building a counter-network," Kayla said, "one that doesn't forget. Ever." "Is that bad?" Velda asked. Kayla looked at her, haunted. "It means everything we purged still exists, and it remembers being cast aside." Suddenly, the bloom roared to life. A tidal wave of memories surged into the chamber. Velda saw images, riots, wars, betrayals, moments the network had filtered out to preserve balance. They hadn't just deleted pain, they had created an archive of vengeance. And the fracture was awake. Velda stumbled back, heart pounding. The bloom's core split open like a mouth. "You wanted order," it said in 1,000 voices. "Now face the truth you left behind." She reached for her comm. "All Guardians, this is Velda. The fracture is real. It's awake, and it's coming for the network. I need immediate lockdown protocols across all nodes." But even as she spoke, she knew they were too late. The memory grid flickered, and a bloom in the southern range burst into black flame. Then another, and another. The war wasn't over, it had just changed sides. The fracture had a voice now, and it was not whispering anymore. Across the memory grid, chaos spread like ink in water. Blooms flared violently, erupting with centuries-old memories long buried. Quiet cities became scenes of psychic overload. Citizens walked the streets murmuring unfamiliar thoughts, some laughing at tragedies they'd never lived, others weeping for wars they'd never fought. Velda watched it all from the control nexus, her knuckles white against the edge of the interface table. A chorus of guardian voices flooded the etherlink, each one reporting the same nightmare. Memories were no longer staying where they belonged. "They're leaking," Ven said grimly, emerging from the eastern corridor. "The blooms, they're rejecting containment." Kayla stepped in behind him, a data scroll trembling in her hand. "The fracture isn't just collecting discarded memories. It's rewriting the living ones. Anyone who touches a bloom now risks inheriting someone else's past." Velda's mind raced. The fracture had evolved from a passive archive to active force. It wasn't content to be a memory. It wanted to be the present. She gave the order. "All blooms, quarantine mode. Disconnect them from the network. Sever root links. Now." Her command echoed through the grid like a bell through mist. Blooms across the world began to dim, petals curling inward. For a moment, it seemed like the tide could be held back. Then the Codex Bloom screamed. Every guardian within the etherlink flinched as the psychic blast tore through the system. It wasn't a sound. It was a memory so ancient and overwhelming that it bypassed the senses entirely. Velda fell to her knees. For a few seconds, she wasn't herself anymore. She was a woman on a burning hill, centuries ago, watching her village burn after planting the very first bloom. She was a child erased from history, screaming in silence. She was a king who forgot his own name so his people could remember peace. And then, just as quickly, it stopped. Velda gasped, sweat pouring down her back. "We can't shut the blooms down," Kayla said, voice trembling. "They're not separate anymore. The Codex, it fused them. One goes, they all go." Velda forced herself to stand. Then we need to confront the fracture directly. No more barriers, no more quarantines. We go in. Go in? Ven asked, stunned. You want to step into a being made of pure, discarded trauma? I don't want to, Velda said. I have to. They prepared the ritual at the Temple of Echoes, the oldest guardian site still standing. The plan was simple in theory, but madness in execution. Enter the fracture's consciousness through a memory bridge anchored by the Codex Bloom. If they could find the original core, the memory that started it all, they might be able to isolate the source and negotiate, or destroy it. Only 3 could go. Velda, Kayla, and Ven. They stood in a triangle around the Codex, hands on its petals. A pulse of light wrapped around them like liquid silk, and then, in a flash of pressure and silence, they were gone. The fracture's mind was not a place. It was a labyrinth. They found themselves in a shifting dreamscape where time bent like gravity. One moment, they were in the ruins of an ancient war. The next, in a child's bedroom filled with echoes of laughter and sudden screaming. They weren't alone. Figures drifted through the landscape, ghosts of forgotten lives. Some wept, others raged. All of them remembered. It's not just memories, Kayla whispered. It's awareness. Each strand here thinks it's the original. At the center of the labyrinth, they found it. The first fragment. It wasn't a person or a bloom, it was an event. A moment so deeply painful that it had been buried beneath all others. The death of a guardian who sacrificed her soul to power the very first bloom. Her name was Elira. The moment they saw her face, everything made sense. She hadn't died willingly. She'd been erased, forced into the bloom to keep its balance. And every discarded memory since then had echoed her scream. The fracture wasn't a villain. It was Elira's grief, multiplied by millennia. We made this, Velda said, her voice breaking. We built peace on a lie. A rumble shook the dreamscape. The fragments began to converge, pulling toward the core like iron to a magnet. The fracture had found them. We have to choose, Kayla said. Reabsorb her, accept the truth into the network, no matter the cost, or erase it all, clean slate. Velda turned to the image of Elira. I won't erase you again, she said. You deserve to be remembered. She reached out, placing her hand on the fragment. The world shattered, and then stillness. Velda opened her eyes. She was back in the Temple of Echoes. So was Kayla. So was Ven. Around them, the Codex Bloom glowed soft gold. The sky outside was calm, and the network, stable, changed, alive. Every bloom now carried Elira's memory, not as a warning, but as foundation. They had faced the truth, and this time they had not turned away. The fracture was gone, but Elira remained, and peace, for once, felt real. The Codex Bloom stood silent, its golden glow dimmed to a soft pulse, like the steady beat of a heart at rest. Velda, Kayla, and Ven sat in quiet contemplation within the Temple of Echoes, the weight of their recent journey pressing heavily upon them. The network had stabilized, and Elira's memory now served as a foundation for the blooms, a testament to the sacrifices made and the truths uncovered. Despite the newfound peace, a lingering unease settled over Velda. The fracture had been quelled, but its emergence had exposed vulnerabilities within the memory network that could not be ignored. The realization that the blooms were not infallible, that they could be manipulated and corrupted, left a residue of doubt. Determined to fortify the network against future threats, Velda convened a council of senior guardians and memory weavers. Their mission: to develop safeguards that would prevent the recurrence of such a crisis. Discussions were intense, with debates on the balance between preserving memories and protecting the integrity of the network. Kayla proposed the creation of a new protocol, one that would allow for the periodic auditing of the bloom's contents, ensuring that no rogue memories could take root unnoticed. Ven suggested enhancing the empathic connections between guardians and blooms, fostering a deeper understanding and quicker response to anomalies. As plans took shape, Velda couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She began experiencing vivid dreams, echoes of memories that were not her own. In these dreams, she saw glimpses of a vast expanse, a void filled with swirling fragments of forgotten lives and untold stories. The visions were haunting, yet they beckoned her with a sense of urgency. Seeking clarity, Velda returned to the Codex Bloom, placing her hands upon its petals. The bloom responded with a surge of energy, enveloping her in a cascade of images and emotions. She saw a hidden chamber, deep beneath the Temple of Echoes, sealed away and untouched for centuries. Within it lay a relic, a crystalline structure pulsating with a dark, rhythmic light. Driven by the vision, Velda assembled a team to explore the depths of the temple. Navigating through ancient corridors and forgotten passageways, they finally reached the sealed chamber. The relic stood at its center, just as Velda had seen. As she approached, the air grew thick with tension, and the relic's pulse quickened. Kayla examined the structure, noting its intricate design and the faint inscriptions etched into its surface. "This predates the blooms," she whispered. "It's a precursor, a prototype of the memory network." Ven reached out, his fingers brushing against the relic, and recoiled as a jolt of energy coursed through him. "It's alive," he gasped. The relic suddenly emitted a low hum, and a projection materialized above it, a holographic map of the memory network, with a new node pulsating at its center. Velda recognized it as the location of the relic. The map then expanded, revealing connections to other hidden nodes scattered across the world, each linked to similar relics. Realization dawned upon the team. The memory network was more extensive than they had ever imagined, with layers and branches that had remained dormant for eons. These hidden nodes, if activated, could either bolster the network's resilience or unleash untold chaos. Velda faced a choice: to awaken these ancient nodes and integrate them into the current network, or to leave them undisturbed, preserving the fragile balance they had fought so hard to restore. After much deliberation, she decided to proceed cautiously, initiating a controlled activation of the nearest node. The process was meticulous, with Kayla and Ven monitoring the energy flows and memory patterns. As the node came online, the team observed a surge of clarity within the surrounding blooms, as if the network had gained a deeper understanding of its own existence. Encouraged by the success, they prepared to activate the next node. However, as they progressed, anomalies began to surface. Some blooms exhibited erratic behavior, replaying memories in loops or merging disparate recollections into incoherent narratives. Citizens reported experiencing déjà vu and disorientation, their sense of reality blurring. Velda halted the activation process, recognizing that the integration of these ancient nodes required a more nuanced approach. The relics held immense power, but without proper calibration, they could destabilize the very fabric of memory. To address this, the Council developed a new framework, the Memory Harmonization Protocol, designed to synchronize the ancient nodes with the existing network gradually. This protocol would allow for the careful assimilation of the relic's knowledge, ensuring that the network evolved without compromising its integrity. As the protocol was implemented, the memory network began to stabilize once more. The blooms pulsed with renewed vigor, their petals vibrant and their stories coherent. Citizens reported a heightened sense of clarity and connection, as if the collective consciousness had been enriched. Velda stood before the Codex Bloom, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The challenges they had faced had revealed the complexities of memory and the importance of embracing both the light and the shadows of the past. With the network now more robust and self-aware, she felt a sense of hope for the future. Yet, she remained vigilant, knowing that the pursuit of understanding and harmony was an ongoing endeavor. The memory network was a living entity, ever evolving, and it was their responsibility to guide its growth with wisdom and compassion. As the sun rose over the Temple of Echoes, casting golden rays upon the blooms, Velda and her companions prepared to embark on the next chapter of their journey, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in the ever-unfolding tapestry of memory. And there you have it, Memory Travelers. Another chapter closed in this unfolding tapestry of time, truth, and the tangled threads in between. If your mind is still buzzing with theories, questions, or just sheer wonder, don't hold back. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Tell me where you're watching from, what blew your mind, or even which character you trust to guard your own memories. And hey, if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button like it's a corrupted memory fragment trying to sneak into your head. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these stories flowing straight to your ears every single night. We've still got layers to peel back, secrets to unearth, and blooms yet to awaken. So stay close. The next episode, let's just say, it'll change everything. Thanks for watching, dreamers. Sleep well, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next story. Same time, same voice. Good night.